Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. A huge welcome to Royal Holloway for those of you that are not Royal Holloway colleagues, and for those of you that are Royal Holloway colleagues, great to see you again on this fantastic occasion. Let me just start by saying a couple of things about why this occasion is important for an academic's life, and also for Royal Holloway more broadly. Becoming a professor in a university is one of the, if you want, key milestones of an academic's life. And for those of you that are academics in this room, you know what it means. Being an academic is a life which is full of aspiration, but also brutal rejection. It's one of innovation, but also desperation. Yeah? It's also one which, if done rightly, can have significant impact to people's lives. And I'm not just talking about students, but I'm also talking about all the stakeholders and the people around us that our work can have significant impact on. And I think there's nothing that encompasses best than Professor Zeyen's work, and I'm going to come to that. Let me start with a bit of a personal story, which very much talks to what just happened now. I first met Anica at the convention center in Seattle. A few weeks, maybe months after I got the job of being the executive dean of this esteemed institution. And I have to say, I was very nervous about meeting Anica. I didn't know Anica was blind, yeah? So I was very nervous that I'm going to meet the first Royal Holloway academic of this esteemed institution. And I have to say it was a momentous moment for me, because I met Anica, and how did I know what impact she will have in my life? The incident that just happened, you have no idea how many such mistakes I have done as an academic and as a leader of this institution. And always Anica puts me right in a very nice and diplomatic manner. So thank you very much for that. Yeah. Now, let me say a couple of things about why Anica is so fantastic at what she does. In many ways, Anica is actually encompassing all the values of the university. Daring, in that she has been pushing the boundaries in what she does, but also how she does it. Innovative, in that she has been able to constantly reinvent herself and her work to deal with the new challenges that her research is focusing on. I don't know how many people you know this, but the Entrepreneurship Hub that we're so proud of, and does some fantastic work in supporting student entrepreneurship, was actually established by Anica, and some funding she received from Santander. She's open, that she's always been engaged with colleagues to educate about what we need to do to conduct ourselves, yeah? And also she's very respectful, in that she always takes time to talk and discuss with our students, stakeholders and colleagues any issues that she faces, what we all face, not just her, yeah? She has a remarkable career that spans several years. A few highlights: she started here as a graduate, a Diplom Kaufman degree in International Business Administration at the International School of Management in Germany. She graduated with distinction and went on to take an MBAs in International Business at the University of Queensland with a high distinction. She completed a PhD in Business Administration at Holloway University in Lüneburg with a thesis with scaling strategies of social entrepreneurship, organization, and active motivation perspectives. Now, for those of us that are in academic, we also know that she has published in some of the top journals in the field. She has constantly kept publishing with a very high citation count, which is very important for me and important for all of us. But she has also managed to have significant impact in her work, but the impact that she has with the grants and everything that she has been able to be competitive grants that she has been able to be so successful in. Not only that, but more recently, what is really impressive about the work that she has done is that she has shifted. I have a brief here, which is from her LinkedIn page and all this kind of stuff. Because I've read her work and I know her work, I know that how much she has shifted from work on social entrepreneurship, family business, business ethics and sustainability, and now she's looking at entrepreneurship and people with disability. So she has been able to continuously reinvent herself as an academic. So, outside her work, Anica volunteers as a speaker and campaigner for the Guide Dogs and Blind Association, and she volunteers for the SARI Coalition for Disabled People. Anica is accompanied by Maisie, and before that, Lassie. So not only we had the pleasure of meeting Anica, but we also had the pleasure of meeting Lassie and then Maisie, both of them fantastic dogs. So I'm delighted to invite my exceptional colleague Anica to give a presentation in her inaugural lecture. So over to you, Anica.
Well, thank you very much. And welcome to everyone who is here. And also thank you and welcome to everyone who watches the recording, because for whatever reason they can't be here. Some of them have what I find tiny reasons, like we're in Australia, it's too far away. But I'll accept it for today. So an inaugural lecture is a special occasion, as Christos has already said, but it's also an interesting and unusual presentation because we're supposed to tell you how we got into academia, about our research, but also lift a bit of the curtain to show you, the person behind the professor, so to speak. So I want to start doing this by telling you that throughout this presentation, I will quote Ed Sheeran. For those of you who know me know that I'm a big fan, and hence I thought he needs to be present. Also, because all the research I've written on disability inclusion, any blog I made, plus slides I've made like these words, are always to his soundtrack, so he kind of needs to be present today as well. And yes, he is even in the acknowledgements in my books. But let's talk research. So my current research is on disability inclusion, and as for academics, we never agree on terms, so even the term disability is not like there's one. So let me talk you through different ways of looking at disability. The oldest is the medical model of disability that came about roughly in the mid-1800s during the Industrial Revolution. And this version, or this way of looking at disability, equates it, puts it equal to impairment. So it only looks at what is different about the body or mind of the person from what back then was defined as norm or normal. So in this view, disability is something that needs fixing, where we need to use the insights from the medical profession to get that disabled body somewhere as close as possible to what we define as normal. This view of disability has in fact caused quite a lot of harm to the community through segregation and ideas of eugenics, especially in the 1920s and 1930s. So as a way of working against that, the disability rights movement pushed forward the notion of the social model of disability in the 1960s and 70s. This idea flips the medical model completely on its head, because it puts the reason for someone to be disabled not on how their body is different from what someone defined as normal, but on society and the inaccessibility and exclusionary way how processes, policies, built environments, communication, and everything is designed. This is also the reason why many people in the disability community in the UK, for instance, prefer to be named as disabled person rather than person with disability, because they want to make it clear that they are disabled by society. A much more recent development is the affirmative model of disability that wants to highlight that disability isn't just about challenges and structures and barriers, but that there's joy and pride, and that disabled people live happy, joyful, fulfilled lives and don't spend all their time trying to figure out how to become non-disabled. And the final and much, again, recent development is the integrated or interactive model of disability. This combines both the medical and the social model. Because one of the criticisms that people have with the social model is that it has taken out the body of the disabled person. And the problem is that yes, society causes a lot of problems and challenges for disabled people, but that's not the only aspect. The bodies are different. If you have an energy limiting condition, no matter how inclusive society is, you're still going to have challenges with your energy. So this is trying to say society can make your life harder or easier as a disabled person, but we still have to acknowledge that our bodies and minds are different, which can cause challenges, but also can be a reason for joy, special skills, abilities, and just being a cool human being. So why do I do research on disability? In order to respond to that, we have to go back to 19 and something, as Doc Brown would say, my favorite movie, Back to the Future. So we have to jump in this DeLorean, not quite 1955 where they go back, but we have to go back to the other important year in the movie. So we're back in East Germany, when Germany was 2 countries, and I grew up in a town called Bernau. Bernau is in the north of Berlin. On your top left, you can see myself with my maternal granddad. Top right, that's my maternal grandma and me. In the middle, my parents and I, and on the bottom, some more toddler and baby photos. And if they look like they're much older than you think I am, that's simply because East German photo paper didn't have a very good quality. I actually have some color photos where we all look orange. So, yeah, then when I was 6 years old, I started primary school in a then reunited Germany. I had my Schultüte, which is the thing I'm holding that every child in Germany gets before they start school, filled with sweets, some school stuff, some little toys, and for me, most importantly, my raccoon, who has kept me from monsters ever since. So I went to what is called, well, imaginatively named, the 3rd primary school of Bernau, which was actually known in the town as the tank school. And yes, we had an actual, literal tank on the school ground facing the teacher's office, which we kids loved. So, but as I cheer and say, everything changed, but I was still the same somehow. And that's what happened to me when I was 11 years old. What happened? Well, I became a member, or I got my membership ID card of the disability community, and therefore joined about 16 to 20% of the world's population. Why do I say I got my membership card? Well, it took 5 years for doctors to figure out what was wrong. Like many disabled people, I could spend ages telling you about lots of interesting stories with medical professions, including those who said to my parents that I in fact have full vision, I'm just dumb and pretend that I can't see. So we spent years, and then when I was 11 we had a diagnosis, and as an add-on bonus to the diagnosis I got my disability ID card that we have in Germany. So I was always disabled because I became visually impaired when I was an infant, but I only got my membership card at the age of 11. So what stayed the same? What stayed the same for me was that I still had the same dreams. I wanted to travel, see the world, and experience a lot of stuff. I grew up with my granddad telling me stories about his time living in Egypt, traveling to Mexico, and much more recently then, once Germany was reunited, traveling to South Africa to visit my grandma's brother's family. So I wanted to do the same. I wanted to see a lot of the world. And I wanted to run my own resort. So exactly what I'm doing right now. Well, I originally started with wanting to be an ice cream vendor, but my parents told me if I eat all the ice creams, I was literally eating my profits. So I thought, if I have a resort and then still eat all the ice cream, at least it's only a tiny part of the revenue. But I was different to other children, and still today my brain does funny things. I like to plan, and my brain goes off into hundreds of different scenarios. So I didn't just say at the age of 11 I wanted a resort. I had a plan that it was going to be a 10,000 acre lot in the Cape region of South Africa, built in the Dutch Cape style, and I had plans drawn up and even an inventory list that included the number of basketballs we would need. So I still wanted to do that. But of course things changed, because remember I became a member of that elite group of disabled people. And that changed how things worked for me. I had integration teachers coming to my school. That was the terminology back then for special education needs teachers in Germany. They came into school and apparently had overhead projections with what I could see, and told my parents and the teachers all the stuff I would not be able to do, that I cannot do, won't be able to do, and will never do. And they talked to me. Every 4 to 6 weeks I was taken out of class for an hour or so and had them talk to me about my future. And things they said to me are exactly what those of you who can are already reading on the slides. Society doesn't want you. You will never attend a university. Give up your dreams now. It's better for you. And they didn't just say that to me once. I heard that quite frequently over a couple of years' time. So, to give you context of where people were coming from, I want to show you data from 2021 to 2023 in the UK. And I know there are a lot of researchers in this room who are now thinking, she's showing us data from the 2020s in the UK while she's talking about Germany in the 1990s. Makes not a lot of sense. But bear with me. In many ways it does. But first, I couldn't find the numbers for Germany from the 90s. But they're similar to the numbers in the UK in the 2020s. And the numbers in the UK for the 2020s are more or less identical to the numbers in the UK in the 1990s. So our progress has almost been zero. So what does it say? Well, in today's world, only 21 to 22% of my community, the visually impaired community, are employed. If you boil it down further and go down into my subgroup, and those with severe sight loss / blindness, 90% of those who are of working age, 16 to 64, are unemployed. And if you go even further and look at those, again, like me, who experience significant sight loss in childhood, then 90% of us will never work for more than 6 months in their entire life. And that's the figures those integration teachers had in the back of their mind. And I'm not defending them, but I want to put in context where they were coming from. And what they were doing, because they were trying to prepare me for this. They told me I wouldn't make it past or into post-16 education. That at the age of 14, it would be best for me to sign up for a special program by the German government for apprenticeships for disabled youth. That was their way of saying sheltered workshop and weaving baskets. First, I want to say nothing against people who weave baskets. Very important job. Second of all, who's ever seen me do something practical knows this would have been the end of the German basket weaving industry. So it wasn't the future I had for me. I always wanted to go to a university. And what I, to this day, see about those integration teachers is I blame them for, first of all, not seeing me as an individual. They just saw me as a statistic. And also for not considering that the system could be different. They just took these figures as that's life. That's what it is, and that's what it will always be. So you just have to bend down and deal with it. So as you can imagine, my teenage years were not exactly fun. So there was some of my darkest years where I really struggled, and again to quote Ed Sheeran here, when the pain gets in, it's the end of youth. And for me, that's what it felt like. I suddenly felt so distant from everyone around me of the same age. And this wasn't just because I was severely bullied and harassed by everyone, by the way, including my teachers. But this was because all the stuff they were worrying about, to me, seemed childish and so little. They were thinking about stuff like, who has a crush on who? Which lipstick is the best one? Which boy band to listen to? Well, we all know it's Backstreet Boys. But also, all these little things where I was thinking about stuff. When am I going to be blind? Because I knew it was going to happen, but no one could tell me when. I was wondering, am I going to finish high school? Am I ever going to go to university? Am I going to have a job? Am I going to have a husband? Am I going to be happy? And there were times when I wasn't sure if it's really worth going on with this, because everything just seemed utterly dark and gloomy and really felt like it was falling apart. But, as I told you earlier, I'm a planner. And my parents always told me that don't focus on the stuff you can't change. You can't change how much you can see, but you can change what you do about it. So we developed a plan. And the plan can be summarized in one simple word: overachieve. My parents were never sugarcoating the reality. They always said, you will always have to be better, you will always have to do more, you have to be more qualified, work harder and everything in order to be given maybe a couple of opportunities. It's not fair, but that's what you have to face. So I, again, wanted to have my hotel, so I knew I had to learn languages. I wanted to study at ISM, the International School of Management, and then live somewhere abroad. So I started. When I was 14, I came to this country for the first time as part of a 2-week language trip. That's me in Trafalgar Square. The other one is me next to the lions at the Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles when I was 15, where I went to learn English for another 4 weeks. And then at 16, I went to New Zealand for 1.5 years to finish high school. My form class and me, and what you can't see back then, as my fellow classmates, I tended to not wear shoes. In school, yes, but outside, no. So I finished school 1.5 years early, came back, and actually did study at ISM, but only tourism for 1 semester. Because then I realized something that my parents had subtly been hinting at, but I didn't want to listen, that the tourism industry probably wasn't a place, and unfortunately still isn't, really well suited for someone who's visually impaired. So I switched to international business. Then, as Krista said, went down to Australia to do my master's. That's where I met Andrew Griffith, who is now the executive dean, who asked me if I wanted to do a PhD with him. I'd never thought about a PhD until that point. And I still really didn't know if I wanted that. So I thought I'd apply to the kind of jobs that I wanted to, strategic development, management consulting, that kind of stuff. And I have this as a plan B. After a very horrendous experience in recruiting, and I made a YouTube video about it because you want to learn more, I got a job as a research and teaching assistant at Holloway University, started there, worked officially part-time, got paid part-time, worked full-time, as you do, and did my PhD on the side. And on the right, that's the day of my PhD defense. It was so hot that by the time the liberation happened, I took off my shoes. And then when I got in to go get my grade, I had forgotten to put them on. So I got my PhD grade barefoot. My PhD took 6 years, again, working full-time. And there were a few things happening along the way. And all roughly within a year's time, in the middle of my PhD. One, I became blind. The thing I knew was going to happen, happened. My eyesight had dropped over the years, but at that point, it just sort of plunged down to, well, more than it is now, but much less than it was before. That coincided with months of dizziness, nausea, and falling over, bumping into stuff and things, which is why to this day you only see me with high-top shoes and the ankles. I got married twice on the same day to the same guy. So that's why I have a reddish dress and a more normal colored wedding dress, all on the same day. Weird German regulations. So yeah, that's Chris. And my plans changed again. So in the middle of my PhD, I decided I was going to do academia. Until then, I wasn't sure. And I decided I was going to be a full professor before I turned 40. We also talked about growing family, and I wanted to see more elephants. And to this day, if anyone has an idea for a research project that combines disability, inclusion, and elephants, talk to me. Still trying to figure that one out. So we got to see my elephants. And yeah, so still I haven't quite answered why I do research in disability, because as Krista said, my PhD was on something completely different. For that, we've got to go back to the future, as Doc Brown would say, and sort of travel to 3 years roughly past my PhD. Because I was finding it difficult. I wasn't inspired by social entrepreneurship anymore. I still liked it, but it just didn't give me that feeling of, ooh, I want to spend the next 6 decades doing this. And I was doing more and more volunteering, becoming more and more active in the disability community, but was still hesitant to change my research topic to disability, even though I wanted to. Because I thought, everyone is just going to go, ooh, of course a disabled person does disability research, what else would she be doing? Which is what had kept me from doing my PhD on that topic. But then I thought, well, yeah, exactly, who else is going to do it? Because we still hardly talk about disability. I go to so many equality, diversity, inclusion conferences where nobody talks about us. And we are 15 to 20% of the population. But for some reason, no one talks about us. So I switched, did a massive change, and went for it. So, yeah, at the end of last year, literally on the 30th and 31st of December, these 2 books came out that I co-authored and co-edited with Juana Branzai from Ivy Business School. One is called Disability at Work, and the other one, Disability and Entrepreneurship. What can I tell you about my research in general? Well, I try to follow the disability mantra, nothing about us without us. As in, I include disabled people in it as much as I can throughout the process. I'm a qualitative researcher, so I like interviews, diary studies, and visual methods such as having my participants draw pictures, take photos, or make videos. And I don't have time today to tell you how a blind academic does visual research. That's another talk. I like interdisciplinary research, so my co-authors are from different parts of management, but also from education, disability studies, film studies, and even neuroscience. And I like working internationally, so I currently do research in Germany, France, the UK, Uganda, India, and South Africa. So let's talk about disability and entrepreneurship. In this little book, Juana and I looked at multiple research projects that we have run throughout the years in different countries on different types of entrepreneurship and how that could be an impact on the disability community, and especially stigma. Stigma is a tainted characteristic that people give to other people and then see them as inferior. And this is what disability is for many. They see it as making the person who's disabled less worthy, less valuable, less lovable. And that stigma comes from many different sources. We have public, social, cultural, and structural stigma. So that can mean that the stigma may be in the way laws are designed, in the way the media talks about people in that group, in the way policies and organizations are set up, in the way religion perpetrates the reasons or how to interact with people of that group. And then we have internalized and self-stigma. That's a form of stigma that people in that groups, in our case, disabled people, put on themselves because they have listened to all of those things so many times that they start believing that in fact they are less worthy, less lovable, less capable, and then don't put themselves out there anymore, because why would you if you don't expect anything to come from it? So in 2 of the chapters, we talk about these projects. On the left, you see a wheelchair user who's on top of a fort in an Indian town. He's up there, he wanted to enjoy the view. And there was no lift or nothing else how to get up there, but Neha Arora, the social entrepreneur who founded Planet Abled, got him up there. What she has experienced as a neurodivergent entrepreneur, a daughter of a blind dad and a wheelchair-using mother, was that she could never travel, and it frustrated her. So she founded Planet Abled and this is the world's first fully inclusive travel agency. What she does is she really fights against social, public and cultural stigma by almost badgering people to listen and to make things possible, and to especially fight against the notion in the tourism industry that people with disabilities don't want to travel and that they don't have money. And especially in India, there's a very strong charity model. Those people need to be helped. They're not customers, they're charity cases. So we don't want to offer this tour for free. And she said, well, we're not asking you. We want you to have it accessible, but they are going to pay for it. So she managed to have the first wheelchair user white raft, blind ski, and do all kinds of stuff. Why? Because they wanted to, and she made it happen. So it's one of the ways where you can see how entrepreneurship can change it, and she's now in the process of setting international standards in the tourism industry for inclusion and accessibility. On the right is a distorted image of a home-based store in Manila in the Philippines. The person in the photo has leprosy or had leprosy and wasn't treated early enough, so has physical deformations. Here we work with the Philippine Leprosy Mission and with the people and tried to figure out what they needed. And they said they wanted to join the economy. They wanted to contribute to the household income. So we gave them micro grants to set up their own little businesses. And in the case of the women on the screen, having the opportunity to contribute to her family's income. By the way, her family hasn't spoken to her in almost 2 years, and she hasn't left the house in 2 years because of her internalized stigma, because she felt that no one would want her. She actually literally stepped outside the front door for the first time in a couple of years. And she now has plans to grow the business and to do more. And we have different cases like that. So in the field, lots of people push disabled people into entrepreneurship because the employment sector is so bad. But we have to remember that entrepreneurship doesn't work for every disabled person, like it just doesn't work for every non-disabled person. So together with Michael Brown, who is an entrepreneur with ADHD, we wrote a book chapter called It's Just Not For Me, where he talks about how he's a reluctant entrepreneur. He's a good entrepreneur, he does it well, he just doesn't want to do it. If anyone has a job, he would rather have that than be an entrepreneur. But he hasn't been given the opportunity in almost 40 years. Because, as I said, hiring is a tremendous story. I hear stories in my research where people were executives in the 4 professional companies, the big 4, had a stroke, became partly paralyzed, and then had to spend 10 years and over 1,000 applications to get a graduate level job. And then have line managers who are surprised about their wealth of knowledge. Well, there were the line managers before. Of course they know this stuff. And as any academic presentation, I need to show you at least some funny diagram. Otherwise you're not getting your £0 worth of money. So it's a model I built with Warner, but what it's trying to say is that we see how disabled people use their bodies in their work in order to try and create meaning. Bless you. It's built on a 2-year diary study we conducted with disabled people in the UK during COVID, so from 2020 to 2022. And what it's trying to say is that we often see body dramas, either of thriving or suffering. And when it comes to suffering, we see how people first internalize all the ableism and discrimination around them, and to the point that they push their bodies to breaking point, where they can't sleep, can't eat, really can't do anything, but just try and keep going because they're glad they have a job, or they just want to prove that they in fact can do it. Then they start slightly pushing back, but often just to the minimum. And then, for instance, we see a cycle of meaning deflation, where they accept inappropriate accommodations. One participant called it, well, I'm happy if I get a hug and a cry. as their reasonable adjustments. And they try to keep going to the point where they realize they can't. And that there's a unique opportunity and challenge in how their bodies and minds are different. And then they start trying to level up. And what is interesting in those cycles of meaning deflation, what we've seen is that people then start advocating, but often not for themselves, but for others. Pink, for instance, said, I just want to make sure nobody else has to go through this, while she kept taking it. And we see other patterns throughout there as well. One of our participants, Herbie, has been with us now for 4.5 years. He's also co-author on this work, so he's fully included in all of it. He's an autistic man, he's now in his late 40s, has always done physical labor, would like to be a speaker or something, but hasn't gotten the opportunity. And he draws his diaries and his entries rather than talking. So we have over 150 of those. On the top left, what you see, for instance, is a drawing that is twofold. On the top, sort of colorful trees, happy people. At the bottom, black and gray, and it says underclass. This is how he perceives the world seeing him. And this comes through in my research a lot. A lot of people use the term, we're the underclass. There's working class, middle class, upper class, and then there's the underclass. On the right, he has drawn another picture where he writes on, imagine if you were excluded all your life. Because that's his experience. He even has had colleagues who called him a robot, who told him that it's okay to treat him like a non-human because, quote, he isn't a real human anyway, so it's okay. So what he does then is he tries to escape into fantasies, but still calls out the ableism. So this picture is a lot more colorful. It shows him on the street, dancing with a neighbor, and there's big sun and everything happy, big colorful words dance. This never happened. And the writing on it says, if autism can understand that neighbors can dance until they're best friends, why shouldn't anyone else or everybody else? So that's again where he, on one hand, calls out, but also draws fantasies. And Herbie, of course, isn't his real name. He wanted to be known. And as Herbie Bond as his author name, Herbie for his favorite car, and Bond for James Bond. If you want to know more of this stuff, I have made a documentary called Invisible together with Raby, who's somewhere in the audience. And I have a podcast, Accessibility and Me, which you can watch and listen to anywhere where you can get podcasts. And season 2 is currently in production. But of course, it's not all about work and work. We want to have fun too. There's a big gap in research on disability and fun, because apparently we don't want it. But hey, we do. So there's a research project I did with Katerina from King's and Leanne from Lancaster Business School, where we looked at how museums make their visual art accessible to blind and visually impaired people. By the way, in the UK, the abbreviation for visually impaired people is VIP. So what was interesting to see is that there's not one form of access, but actually 3: autonomous, embodied, and social access. Autonomous access means that we should create situations where blind folks can just rock up at a museum and enjoy it and not have to book an audio described to us 3 months ahead of time on a Tuesday at 10 a.m. because that's the only time that's available. Social access is all about feeling welcome, not being stared at by other visitors, but also not being told off by the staff if you come with a guide dog, things like that. And embodied access is trying to figure out how to use the whole body of the person so that they can experience the art. So touch, smell, sense of space, and all of that. And of course it all comes with restrictions. Museums don't have endless resources. You can't touch everything because, don't want to break a 2,000-year-old vase. And sometimes the way they try to create autonomous access then makes you stand out in a negative way. For instance, at a British museum, if you're blind, you get a sachet and you're allowed to touch everything in the Egyptian exhibition. but that comes with visitors constantly telling you, you're not supposed to touch that, you're not supposed to touch that. And even some of the staff do. So again, you stand out in a bad way. And because we want to change how the museum industry works, and because Katharina, Leanne and I are not museum people, we're not artists, we're not curators, we got the help from Zoe Partington, Shape Arts and King's Culture and put on our own exhibition where we showcase how you can make museums accessible, called The Layers of Vision, completely co-produced with our 10 blind and partially sighted artists. No decision was just made by us, everything collectively. What I've learned throughout the time I've been doing research on disability is that there's disability work and ability work. And on the screen you see a sunflower that's in the final chapter of this lovely book that Warner and I made, and represents all the invisible and unpaid work disabled people do to thrive and survive in a world that is not designed for them and that often doesn't even think about them. Disability work is everything people do to fight against or deal with discrimination and ableism. Questions such as, who do I tell about my disability and when? How much detail do I say? When do I speak up if something isn't inaccessible to me? Or when I'm just quiet because I frankly don't have the energy that day to say yet another thing? When do I advocate just for myself or for the entire community? Ability work is all the work disabled people do in order to show that in fact they have skills and abilities to offer, that they're not less capable. I, for instance, hate the word able-bodied because it tells us that we're less able. We're not. We're also not differently able. We're just different. So that's something I see, and that's where I want to continue my work. Of course, I couldn't have done all of this on my own, so I want to thank you to the funders who by now have given me a few million, so thanks for that. I want to thank the 3 universities I worked for, all my co-authors, who are numerous, because I do work with medical researchers, so I have papers with like 25 people on it. I want to thank my former PhD students at the top, and my current PhD students at the bottom, because I always find conversations with them engaging and learn a lot. I want to thank my former support workers, Ivronia and Emilia, and my current one, Amy, because they make it possible to work in a system that is still very much not disability inclusive and help with things I can't see, that I can't do, simply because the structures aren't accessible yet. I want to thank my former Gaita Klassi, who's here, who has always been the star at graduations in her little graduation gown, who took me to countless lectures, workshops, field work trips, went to 15 different countries with me, and yes, took me to 5 out of the 6 Sheeran concerts I watched while becoming a professor. She was also the only one home when I got the email that I'd been promoted, and looked at me as if I'd lost my mind when I was jumping up and down. I want to thank my granddad, who had secretly planned to be here, but sadly and unexpectedly passed away just a few weeks ago. He was always an inspiration. He showed me work ethics. He died at the age of 90, and literally to the day before he died, he was still giving instructions to the people who are in his name running a sports club that he founded at the age of 75. Why? Because no one else was doing it, so he thought he needed to coach. And yes, until Christmas, he was actually coaching sports at the age of 90. He also followed me all around the world, and even though he's not a thrill rider, went on a jet boat in New Zealand because his granddaughter wanted to. I want to thank my parents, who've always been cheerleaders, who didn't listen to the integration teachers who told them to sign off and just get rid of my future, who sacrificed a lot of their free time to work really hard to pay for all of my very expensive education, who told me only when I turned 30 that they had a secret plan B, that if I wasn't going to get a job anywhere, that they were going to find a company to employ me so that I could work in the field that I wanted to. But we were then happy that by that point I worked here, had a husband, I was doing pretty well. I want to thank my husband, who's been by my side, Chris, for over 19 years. There's about 18 years between those two photos. Who was with me when I became blind, who kept me fed during my PhD when I was working 90 to 100 hours a week. And I still benefit from that time because he was so bored that he spent a lot of time baking and cooking, so still reap the benefits from that. Who believes in me in times when I am overcome by internalized ableism and thinking that I won't be able to do something. He's there and tells me, yeah, you will, just wait. And yeah, what is next? What comes next? More adventures with my new guide dog, Maisie. For instance, tomorrow we're off to the United Nations in Vienna to talk disability. And of course, she has already got her fan shirt for her first Ed Sheeran concert in the summer. She is ready, and let's see if she manages more concerts than last week. I want to do more research on disability, entrepreneurship, work, and leisure. I want to work more on impact, make more documentaries. I've written a play, maybe I'm going to produce it, make a comic book, currently working on that. So doing all kinds of stuff, working with companies, NGOs, just to make this place much more disability inclusive. And why? Well, because I believe we shouldn't have had to wait until 2024 to have disability representation in Barbie, first line Barbie. Because today there still shouldn't be twice as many non-disabled students achieving a degree level qualification than disabled students. That employment figures shouldn't be double for non-disabled people versus non-disabled people. That there should have been a much bigger outcry last year when the United Nations published an interim executive summary on the Sustainable Development Goals linked to disability, where it said that 14% of the goals are actually now worse or in stagnation, 30% are insufficiently progressing, and that we need to accelerate 2 to 60 times to at least have a chance of achieving Sustainable Development Goals for the disability community by 2030. Also because I believe we should no longer have a situation where people find out they're disabled, become disabled, and think that's the end. Where they struggle, where they lose their jobs, feel that there's no hope. Because that really shouldn't happen anymore in 2025. And to come back to the title of my talk, why disability inclusion is everyone's business. Well, frankly, and to sound a bit doomy and gloomy, disability is the only protected characteristic where anyone can become a member at any given point. Everyone in this room will experience disability, either personally or with their loved ones. Maybe temporarily, maybe for a long time. It's also bad business, because the UK economy alone loses about £2 billion each month because of inaccessible products and services. Because you don't just lose the disabled person, you lose their family. If I can't go, my family doesn't go. We're also losing talent and skills, so it makes business sense. But also, we benefit. All of you are texting, developed for the deaf. Many of you listen to audiobooks, developed for us blind folks. And many of you use electric toothbrushes, developed for those with mobility and muscular issues in their hands. So I want to thank you, and I want to say that when I did my last lecture, like almost 30 years, or whenever, I don't want to have to tell you stories about severe discrimination, marginalization, and so forth anymore. I want to be able to just talk about the amazing strides we've done in disability inclusion, because we all worked together and worked as a team for disability inclusion. Thank you.
Neil asked me to say some concluding comments. I'm speechless. I honestly don't know what to. Hopefully, we're not going to have a tank pointing at us to make the changes that you are suggesting. One of the things I did not mention in my introductory, in a few words I've mentioned, is that Anica is also a vice dean for EDI, and many of the things that the NTC is discussing advocating for are actually implementing at the school. So hopefully, as you said, 30 years from now, we'll have implemented many of those, and we'll be talking about the change that we all have been making. We will have made by then. Before I invite you to join us for a drink in Ibel's outside, and again congratulate once again Anica, I would like to either remind or inform everyone that today it's actually Anica's birthday. So, and I'm not going to embarrass all of you by asking to sing happy birthday to Anica. Again, Anica, huge congratulations. Thank you very much for this amazing talk. And we can all walk outside and have nibbles and a bit of wine and talk to Anica. Again, thank you.
Thank you.